Hello, this is Joe Rosenberg with Process Triage. Thanks for the moment. This is a case study introduction to the process of a First Amendment peaceable assembly. By way of background, my company is our sweet spot is teaching and coaching teams how to issue process together, how to solve problems together, how to and it's a joy. We've done over 1,000 of them, and what we know is that if you put a team of go-to experts that really know everything about how a process is supposed to work, and you put them in a room together and you create an environment where they can issue process together, they come up with terrific solutions. This issue processing is focused on those who do the work, so that the leadership suite can worry or concern themselves with more strategic things. Anyway, the Constitution, our wonderful, amazing Constitution, the greatest thing that has ever been written as a social contract in history, in all civilization, says that the government does not grant, but it protects a transcendent right to peaceably assemble. And in that peaceable assembly, included in that, of course, is free speech. Anyway, it occurred to me after watching Charlottesville and San Francisco that the government not only grants or protects this right, this protection of this right means it must enforce the peace of it. And meaning that as this peaceful enforcement, right, the government, our government, we, right, can't take sides in these peaceable assemblies, right, no matter how repugnant or virtuous the message of the assembly. It must enforce the peace and protect that freedom. That said, to enforce or to deliver or to protect the peace of a constitutionally protected assembly, it's a process. And it involves several people, obviously the sponsor, the venue where it's at, depending on the size and numbers of people involved, participants, right? It may require sanitation, might require safety, safe egress in and ingress in and egress out. Anyway, it's a project. That said, I've drafted a sketch of what this peaceable assembly process is, and again, I offer any jurisdiction that would like to pay travel, is I will personally facilitate any jurisdiction that would like to improve their process. That said, I'll now turn to the case study map and take you through it.
The first thing you want to do is print the map. It'll be the first 3 pages of the case study. Once you've done that, then here's how you read it. Essentially, it's very simple to read. Actions are arrows, all right, like review sales proposal here. The numbers like 110, 120, these are just reference numbers. They don't really have any meaning other than to read the map quickly. But the action's on the arrow, and then whatever it creates, the work product, is in a circle, and there are 4 kinds of circles. A green one will be a process trigger, like think green light go. Work that the process owner performs, whoever's executing the process, it's theirs. There'll be white non-milestone or red milestone deliverables or results. A milestone occurs when significant work is done or work will be handed off to somebody else. And then the these external deliverables or results will be things that the process requires, but the owner of the process or whoever's running the process doesn't really have any control over. And these can be a real problem. Okay, so it's essentially that's it. Actions and results, very simple. And the map illustrates the results, these things, these created work in the order they finish, left to right, in the flow of the arrow. Okay. Couple of other symbols we may not. If the action is optional or conditional, you'll see a little hash mark here, and and an explanation what the rule is. Okay, but otherwise it's very, very simple. Action, result, action, result. Okay. Now there are two phases to this sketch: assembly planning and assembly event management. Okay. Assembly planning begins with this trigger: hey, someone wants to have an assembly. Okay. And then they'll scope the requirements. Okay, there'll be things like number of people, what's the assembly about, what's the venue, when should it be done, things like that. What's the scope? And then a decision should be made: is a permit required? And if a permit's required, obviously the jurisdiction that has authority, right, would have to publish those requirements. You would need those to request the assembly, and that's if it was needed. Okay, and if a request was submitted, then an external approving authority would have to evaluate the permit request and either send it back for rework or approve it, which would then whoever was sponsoring the assembly would then publish the assembly notice. Now, if the a permit's not required, then you would simply, hey, here's the scope of the assembly, publish the notice. Now, if an RSVP is required, in other words, we want to know who's coming so that we can plan accordingly, then whoever's participants would respond, and then you'd finalize your plans. If the RSVP is not expected, then you'd finalize the assembly plan. So the fastest way to plan an assembly is scope it, publish a notice, and finalize your plans. Okay, the more complicated scenario is you'd scope it, request a permit based on the requirements, wait for that to be reviewed. Once it's approved, publish a notice, get your RSVPs, and finalize your assembly. Okay, which now leads to the second phase or sub-process, which is managing the event. And some date prior to the event, you would expect the sponsor to stage the assembly, right? Speaker location, participants, things like that. What's collateral, signage, things like that. And it's possible that you would have to stage safety and security resources if necessary, such as barriers, traffic control, things like that, police. And you might have to stage media in case, if they were interested. Okay, so staging the event would be the sponsor, possible security, and other resources, sanitation, for example, and media. And once that's staged, then we'd hold the assembly. Looks like I've got anyway. So we hold the assembly, and of course your safety and security are being enforced while that's happening. And at some point the assembly is completed. The safety and security, they'd complete their job. You'd do your post assembly tasks, such as cleanup, for example. And then once law enforcement or security's done, and the sponsor's done theirs, and they would close the assembly, whatever that would be, and clear the area, for example, and then obviously report your results. It's possible that during the assembly, while safety and security is being enforced, that perhaps if it's observed, you would detain any violators of the peace. Okay, so then they would, of course, be subject to the rule of law due process. Okay. At the same time, the media's stage, they're going to observe the assembly, and they may report what they're observing either live or after the fact. Okay, and then of course, when you report your assembly, you'd say, okay, well, what was the publicity we got? Now, what's important about triaging is that for us to improve a process, we have to agree on how well or how capable the process must be, and that's called a process capability goal. And the sketch here is that the assembly planning process or sub-process should be capable of, and I'll just cover the bullet points here. Submit a permit request that meets the jurisdiction having authority, meets their criteria. We'd like that to be first submission, allowing for occasional cosmetic corrections. We'd like the process to be able to evaluate and grant or deny a permit request in a courteous, efficient, sponsor-friendly manner. would like to be able to effectively announce the assembly to invite potential participants and make sure our stakeholders and impacted individuals are aware of any conveniences related to the assembly. And finally, we want the planning process to be able to publish an assembly plan that enables venue suppliers like sanitation, law enforcement, the media, to schedule appropriate resources to ensure that all participants experience that peaceable constitutional legal assembly. The event itself, what that process should be capable of is ensuring that constitutionally protected peace, right, that peaceful assembly, that right, is protected at all times, meaning restraining at a minimum or removing non-peaceable participants. Should be able to deliver a satisfying participant experience within the enforcement of protectable behavior. We should expect sufficient public safety and sanitation and emergency medical support appropriate for the demographics and the number of participants. And finally, a well-managed event should ensure safe and efficient ingress into and egress from the assembly venue. What we know from these triaging workshops that we do is, if you'd expect if you triage your team that managed this process, we know that it improves team building and collaboration. We know that the team will be pleased with identifying and ranking their solutions. About 28% of triagers, the most important thing they got out of it was jointly or collaboratively processing these pain points. And just barely over a third really enjoy mapping and visualizing the process so that they can work together. So our view of why we do these triages, these process analysis sessions, is that it's a quote from SEAL Team 6 that all of us are smarter than any one of us. And here's an example of a team that's mapped their process, and they're now it's their closing remarks after they've identified points of pain and nominated their solutions. Okay?
So thanks for your time. If you're interested in this team issue processing capability, our sweet spot is a one-day workshop, and you simply select an understudy on your staff to be the host, and we manage it with them. I can be reached at 913-269-3410. That's my mobile phone. However, you'll need to text first because I can't answer numbers that are not in my contacts list because it's a time management thing. I don't mean to be discourteous. Or you can reach out to us at processtriage.com. We have hundreds of case studies of all kinds of enterprises that we've triaged, public, private, almost in every industry. And so if it's culture, if it's who you are, that you really want to delegate issue processing to those who live and do the core process work of your organization, give us a call. We can hopefully provide a terrific team issue processing experience for you. Thank you very much, and God bless our First Amendment.